I want to start with the sound, because the sound is the thing I still hear at night. It was the sound of my own key not turning. A small sound. A dry mechanical refusal. I had turned that key in that lock more than 1,000 times. And on the evening of October 12th, 2019, it simply would not move. My name does not matter as much as what happened, but I will tell you that I was 34 years old, that I lived alone, and that I had been gone for 9 days. I worked a contract job 2 states away, and when it ended, I drove home through the night because I missed my own bed. I missed my own coffee maker. I missed the quiet of a place that was mine. I pulled into the driveway a little after 11. The porch light was on. I remember thinking that was strange because I never left the porch light on. I am the kind of person who checks the stove twice. I unplugged the toaster. I do not leave lights burning for 9 days. But I told myself I had been tired the morning I left, and tired people forget things. I walked up the steps. I put my key in the lock, and the key would not turn. I tried again. I jiggled it the way you do, lifting the door slightly on its hinges, the little trick every renter learns. Nothing. The key went in. The key would not turn. It was as if the lock had been changed. And then, before I could even decide what to do, the porch light got brighter, because the door opened from the inside. A man stood there. He was maybe 50. He wore a gray sweatshirt and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. Behind him, I could see my hallway. Except it was not my hallway. The walls were a different color. There was a coat rack I had never owned. There was the smell of someone else's dinner. He looked at me the way you look at a stranger on your own porch at 11 at night, with caution, with a little fear. And he said, "Can I help you?" I said, "I think there is a mistake. I live here." He did not laugh. He did not get angry. He just tilted his head, the way a person does when they are trying to be kind to someone they have decided is confused or drunk or lost. And he said, "No, I am sorry. I think you have the wrong house. I have lived here for 6 years. 6 years. Now I need you to understand something. I knew my address. I knew the crack in the 3rd porch step. I knew the dent in the mailbox where a delivery truck had clipped it the winter before. I was standing on the right porch. I was standing at the right door, and a stranger was telling me he had lived inside it for 6 years. I looked at the number beside the door. It was my number. I looked at the street sign at the corner, just visible under the street light. It was my street. Everything was exactly where it should be, and a man I had never seen was standing in my home telling me it had been his for longer than I had even lived in the city. I think I said something like, "That is not possible." And he, to his credit, did not slam the door. He said, "Are you all right? Do you need me to call someone?" And the kindness in his voice was the worst part, because it meant he truly believed it. He was not lying to me. He was not playing a trick. From where he stood, I was the intruder. I backed down the steps. My legs did not feel like mine. I walked to my car and I sat in it, and I gripped the wheel and I tried to think of a single rational explanation. I had driven 7 hours. I was running on gas station coffee and 3 hours of sleep. Maybe I was on the wrong street. Maybe exhaustion had peeled something loose in my mind. So I did the only thing I could think of. I opened the Maps application on my phone and I let it find me. The little blue dot settled exactly on my house. The address printed across the bottom of the screen was my address. The dot did not lie. I was where I lived, and I did not live there anymore. I want to slow down here, because this is the part people always ask about. They ask, why did you not just call the police right away? And the honest answer is that when reality breaks in front of you, your first instinct is not to call for help. Your first instinct is to find the seam, to find the trick. Because if there is a trick, then the world still makes sense, and you are just being fooled. I would rather have been fooled. I sat in that car, and I wanted, more than anything, to be the victim of a clever prank. But there was no audience. There were no cameras. There was just a dark street and a man eating dinner inside the walls I had painted myself. I called the police at 11:40. I told the dispatcher that someone was living in my house. I gave my address. There was a pause, and then she asked me to confirm the address again, and I did, and she said a unit was on the way. The officer who arrived was young and patient. I told him everything. He listened. Then he walked up to the door and knocked, and the same man answered, calmer now, and the two of them spoke in low voices on the porch while I stood on the lawn feeling like a ghost at my own funeral. After a few minutes, the officer came back to me, and he asked me a question that I will remember for the rest of my life. He asked, "Sir, when did you say you moved out?" I said I did not move out. I said I had been gone 9 days for work. He nodded slowly, and he said, "The gentleman has a lease. He has mail. He has a utility bill on the counter with his name and this address. He says he has never met you." I asked to see the lease. The officer, again to his credit, asked the man, and the man brought it to the door. It was a real lease. It had the property management company I rented from at the top. It had this address. It had the man's name and a signature and a start date of June 1st, 2013. 2013. I had moved into that house in the spring of 2017. According to the paper in that man's hand, he had been living there 4 years before I ever arrived. I told the officer I had my own lease. I pulled it up on my phone, the scanned copy I kept in my email like a responsible adult. And there it was. My name, this address, a start date in 2017, the same property management company at the top, 2 leases, same house, same company, different tenants, different years, both real. The officer looked at my phone for a long time. Then he looked at the paper in the man's hand. And I watched something change in his face. The patience was still there, but underneath it now was confusion. The real kind. The kind a person cannot fake. He had walked up to that porch, certain that one of us was lying or sick. And now he was holding 2 true things that could not both be true. He took down the name of the property management company from both documents. And he frowned, and he said, "I am going to make a call." While he was on the radio, I stood with the man on the lawn. The fear had gone out of him. He was not afraid of me anymore. I think he had realized, the same way I had, that whatever this was, it was bigger than the 2 of us. He told me his name. He told me he was a retired teacher. He told me his wife had passed 2 years before, and that this house was where they had spent her last years, and that every room in it held something of her. He was not telling me this to win. He was telling me because he needed me to understand that this place was as much his as it was mine. And I believed him. That was the terrible thing. I believed every word. The officer came back, and here is where the floor truly dropped out. The property management company on both leases had gone out of business in 2016. It did not exist. It had not existed for 3 years before I signed my lease with it. Let me say that again, because I had to hear it 3 times before it landed. The company that I had paid rent to every single month, the company whose name was printed on the lease in my email, the company I had emailed about a leaky faucet that very spring, had been dissolved in 2016. On paper, I had been renting from a ghost, and so had he. I do not know how long I stood there. The officer was talking, the man was talking, but I had stopped being able to hear individual words, because my mind had gone somewhere cold and quiet, turning over a single impossible question. If the company did not exist, who had been cashing my rent checks? Who had answered my emails? Who had handed me the keys in the spring of 2017 on this porch with a smile and welcomed me home? I drove to a motel that night. I could not think of anything else to do. The officer gave me a case number and told me a detective would follow up. I lay on a stiff motel bed and I stared at the ceiling, and I went through the last 2.5 years of my life looking for the place where it had cracked. I found things. Once you start looking, you find things. I had never met a neighbor, not once in 2.5 years. I had told myself I was private, that the street was quiet, that people kept to themselves, but 2.5 years and not one face, not one borrowed cup of sugar, not one wave from a driveway. My mail had always been thin. Bills came to my email. The physical mailbox held flyers and almost nothing else. I had thought of it as a small mercy in a world drowning in paper. Now it felt like something else, like I had never quite been written into the place at all. And the man who handed me the keys. I tried to picture his face, and I could not. I could picture the smile. I could picture the clipboard, I could not picture the face. I had given this person money every month for 30 months, and I could not have picked him out of a room. The detective called me 4 days later. I want to tell you that she solved it, that there was a clean answer, a villain in handcuffs, a headline. There was not. What she found was this. The house had been owned, on paper, by a holding company that had been buying up properties in the neighborhood quietly for years. When the original management company dissolved in 2016, someone, and they were never able to prove exactly who, had simply kept operating it, kept the website up, kept the email running, kept signing leases under a dead company's name and collecting rent into an account that took the detective months to even locate. The retired teacher had signed his lease in 2013 when the company was still real. He had been grandfathered into the fiction. He had just kept paying, and they had just kept taking, and no one had ever come to the door. And me, I had answered an online listing in the spring of 2017, the same house, the same address, listed for rent by a company that had been dead for a year. I had toured a different unit, the detective believed, a vacant one a few doors down, dressed up to look like the listing. I had signed papers in a coffee shop. I had been handed a key. And the key, the detective said, had probably never fit the door I thought was mine at all. I had simply never tested it, because for 9 days at a time, sometimes longer, I was away for work, and when I came back, I used the side entrance to the unit I actually occupied, 3 houses down, the one I had quietly, unknowingly, been living in the whole time. I need you to sit with that because it took me weeks to accept it. I had been living 3 doors down from the house on my lease, the house in the maps application, the house with my number on it. Someone had rented me the right address and the wrong building, and the streetlights and the porch numbers and my own exhausted certainty had filled in the rest. For 2.5 years I had walked into a home that matched my key, and I had never once stood at the door that matched my paperwork. Until the night I did, and another man opened it. The blue dot on my phone had not been wrong. It had been pointing at the truth I had never checked. The address was mine. The house was never mine at all. They never caught the person behind it. The account was emptied. The website went dark within a week of the detective's first call. Somewhere out there, someone had collected rent from 2 people for the same house for years, from a company that was already a ghost and had simply walked away when the floor finally gave out. The retired teacher and I stayed in touch for a while, the way 2 survivors of the same shipwreck do. He kept his house eventually. The real owners, the holding company, had no interest in evicting a man who had paid faithfully for 6 years, and they let him sign a real lease at last. I did not stay. I could not. I moved to a different city. I check my locks now in a way that is not entirely healthy. I have met every one of my neighbors. I have walked to my mailbox and tested the key in my own door more times than I will admit. People ask me what the lesson is. I do not think there is a clean one. I think the lesson is only this. We trust the things that feel solid, a number beside a door, a key in our pocket, a dot on a map. We build our whole sense of safety on the idea that the place we call home is the place that is actually ours, and almost always it is. But I stood on the right porch, at the right address, with the right number glowing beside the door, and I knocked, and a stranger answered, and he was not the liar. He was not the thief. He was just a man who lived there. I was the one who had been living in a story someone else had written. I just did not find out until the night I knocked on my own door, and another man opened it.